3. I tell you, this particular chapter has so many wonderful lessons that we can glean from it. But let me sort of give you an overall story of what's going on here in chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar has, and of course you probably know this, you go back in the book of Daniel a little bit, you'll find that he had brought Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, he had brought them to Babylon with him, and of course he's going to train them to be some of his men, some of his workers, and of course God had told the children of Israel they were going to spend 70 years there in Babylon because of their sins and so forth. And so anyway, here they are, and Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so Nebuchadnezzar, he's a very prideful man. He gets this idea that he wants to set up an image and have all the governors and just all kind of officials to come from all over to worship at this image. And let me just say this: worship is a natural born instinct. I mean, that comes natural. I may have told you this, but when I went to Managua, Nicaragua, and then from there to Honduras and then Guatemala, I approached this Catholic church, a huge, beautiful Catholic church. And at the bottom of the walkway was these 3 steps, and this guy had a lantern, and it was lit, and he was bowing back and forth and waving that lantern. And so I asked my fellows with me, I said, "This guy, what's he doing?" He said, "Well, he's trying to get the fire god to give him permission to go up the walkway and into the Catholic Church." So here he was worshiping the fire god, and then he's going to go in and worship all these idols in the Catholic Church. And I'm just saying there's a natural born tendency for humans to worship something. So Nebuchadnezzar has decided to set up this image, and it's 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, and history tells us it was sitting up on a pedestal. And it was, if you read chapter 3, you'll find it was in the plains, so that means that it could be seen from probably at least 12 miles out either direction. If you're coming from this direction, you could see it from 12 miles out. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were watching this thing be built there in the plain. Now, I don't know where Daniel was. He may have been on some kind of business because he was in authority, but he wasn't involved in this particular story. But 90 feet tall, 9 feet wide, and this thing is being constructed there and it's of gold. Now, I don't think it was pure gold because probably overlaid with, some wood and this kind of thing, and the gold's overlaid. But anyway, they tell us that if you were to take the cost of building this thing 90 feet tall, 9 feet wide in that day, it would be worth $1.9 billion in today's economy. So he didn't spare any expenses building this huge thing. So what was going to happen was he was going to have all these, and you read this in the text here, he's going to have all these people from all the different provinces, governors and leaders of all sorts, and multitudes of people. And they were going to gather at this particular day, and when the thing has been finished and erected and set up there in the plains, and they're going to gather there for this dedication of this statue. And when the day arrives, they did like that culture called for. They used music to get everything started because, you had so many different languages represented there that the herald, the man who announced it's time to bow down, wouldn't have been able to speak in all their languages. But in the culture of that day, the different types of instruments were used, and they would use them to call for worship, they use them to call for battle, whatever the case is. And so anyway, here's these multitudes of people gathered before this 90-foot image. And the herald said in verse 4, he said, now when you hear the sound of the music, then you need to bow. And of course the command was, if you don't bow, then you're going to be put in a furnace and you're going to be burned. And of course the Babylonian people were, and I hate to use the term, but they made a habit of roasting their enemies. That was a big thing with them. And so we're going to put you in this furnace if you don't bow before it. And anyway, the music starts, and at the sound of the music, these multitudes of people, I mean, they begin to bow. And when the dust settles, you see 3 young men standing there. I mean, they're tall and erect and not bowing. Well, Nebuchadnezzar finds out about it, and he sends for them and brings them back into his presence. And if you look at verse 17, he's told them, of course, that if they don't bow, he's going to put them in the furnace. And verse 17, they said, well, our God will deliver us. I mean, you can do that, but God's going to deliver us. But look at verse 18, where they said, but if not. That's one of my favorite verses. I mean, I hear what you're telling me, and I feel like God can deliver us, but if He chooses not to, we're still not going to bow.
Amen.
So like I said, there's so many lessons in verse 3. In verse 3. But I want to focus on making some decisions before the fact. Before something happens. You make a decision before you get in the tight, before you get into the situation. You don't wait until you get there and then let peer pressure and danger and all the other things make the decision for you. You make the decision back here. And that's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did. They saw this thing being built. Again, you could see it from 12 miles out. And I'm sure as they saw it being built, they knew what was going to happen. But they'd already made their mind up. I don't care what they're going to demand. I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. Now, some of you have heard me tell this before, but I never was one, even as an unsaved boy, to follow the crowd. I never did do that. I know my brother Larry, he loved, when we were teenagers, they had what they call Madras shirts. They were expensive, and to me, they weren't really that nice looking, but he wanted one. He wanted me to have one. So he bought us both one. Well, I wore it a few times, but I didn't wear it because the crowd was doing it. I just never have been one to let peer pressure decide for me what I was going to do, even as a teenager. But I made a decision years ago, and you've heard me tell this. I made a decision years ago that I would never put any kind of alcoholic beverage to my mouth. Champagne, beer, wine, any kind of alcoholic beverage. And it wasn't because I was a Christian, but several things led me to make that decision as a boy, as an elementary boy. The first reason I made that decision is because I saw what it did to some of my family members. My granddaddy was a very vile and wicked man. Alcohol consumed his life, and let me fast forward just a little bit and tell you, I'm just so pleased to hear that about 2 months before he died, he received Christ as his Savior. But I had witnessed to him a number of times. But when I was a boy, when I was 12, 13 years of age, I saw what alcohol did to my granddaddy. Some of it's sort of funny, but he'd say to my grandmother, he had a nickname for her, and the nickname was Dolby, D-O-L-B-Y. And he got that name from a restaurant that was on Ponce de Leon Avenue out there. So he'd call her Dolby. But when he get to drinking, it'd come out Dopey. Dopey! And they lived down in a hollow in Scottdale, and he was trying to make his way down that dark trail that night. And he was saying, Dopey! Come help me. And my grandmother was one of the sweetest, finest little women you'd ever meet. So meek and mild, but she didn't pay attention to him. And down that trail he came, and Dopey! And he got to the creek and he missed the bridge and went through the water. Got himself all the way, Dopey! And when he got into the house, he's taking his trousers off because he's all wet. And when he got his trousers off, my grandmother took a switch and switched his legs good.
Way to go, way to go. Amen.
So I had watched things of that nature, and I said, I don't want to ever be that kind of person. Didn't have anything to do with Christianity at that time. And then I had an uncle, my Uncle Joe. He was my hero. He was so handsome and personable, and I tell you, I just loved it when he came to the house when I was a boy, and enjoyed his company, and we'd always sit and laugh. But I watched him. He'd gotten out of the service. He was a handsome man in his uniform, and he'd gotten out of the service, and in the process of time, he lost 2 families through divorce because he began to drink, and lost a wife and some children on 2 occasions, and then at the time of this story, he was living in Conyers there, right across the street from my grandmother. And I am a Christian by now, and I've gone down to witness to him. And I went in, and I'm sitting there across the coffee table from Joe, and his teeth are missing, his hair is shaggy. He's got an old flop hat, 2 or 3 stale jokes. And I said, Joe, you used to be one of my heroes. I wanted to be like you. I looked up to you, admired you. But I said, sitting across this table from you now, looking at you, I would not want what you are. I said, if you were to put $1 million on that coffee table and ask me to trade places with you, I said that $1 million would stay on the table. Because I don't want to be what you are.
Right.
But alcohol had done that to him through the years. So I'm saying that even before I became a Christian, I made a decision that I would never put any kind of alcoholic beverage in my mouth. Now, as a Christian now, I know that the sins of the fathers are visited down to the 3rd and 4th generation. And so whatever was a battle in my family could easily become my battle as well. And I did not want that.
Amen.
So I stand before you today saying to you, I have never, ever. Now, I'm ashamed to tell you this. I would go to parties, and they would drink, but they always knew to have me something like a Coke or some tea or whatever. I know on one occasion they had some punch, and somebody had spiked the punch. And they handed me one of the cups. And as I was about to drink it, I forget who told me this, they said, they spiked your punch. I said, you've got to be teasing me. They said, no, I wanted to warn you. I got mad from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. I stood in the middle of that living room and I said, whoever did that, step here. I said, come on. I said, you were brave enough to do that. Come on out here. And when I get through with you, you'll crawl out of this room. I was so mad at whoever did. When nobody stepped forward and I left the party. But I did not want alcohol to do to me what it had done to so many members of my family. So I chose before the fact. Now, again, I told you I'm ashamed of this, but I was the driver for my buddies. We'd go up to Hunter Street there and pay a guy some money to go across the road to the liquor store. Because back then, you couldn't buy it at the grocery store. You had to go to the liquor store. And so we'd pay him to go across the liquor store and buy some for my buddies. And then while they got drunk, I'd drive them around. Well, my buddy Bruce had gotten sloppy drunk. And I told him, I said, Bruce, I want you to go home with me because I don't want your mama to see you in this kind of shape. I said, she'll be so hurt, and so you go home with me and spend the night with me. Some of you have heard me tell this story, but we got to the house and went to the bedroom, and he went straight to the bathroom. And I'll try not to be real graphic, but he went straight to the bathroom, got his head over that commode. That's in the Greek. Oh, Daryl. So I got up and shut the door and went to bed and went to sleep. He got up the next morning, he's holding his head. He said, woo, said we had a time last night, didn't we? I said, well, Bruce, what'd we do? He said, I don't remember, but we had a time. He said, man, my head hurts. He said, I was sick all night long. I said, Bruce, do you know how dumb that sounds? I said, you puked all night. Your head is killing you. You don't remember what you did, but you had a good time. That is the dumbest thing I have ever heard said. Don't you think? I mean, that's dumb, but people will do that. And here my buddy Bruce thought that was a good time. Well, fortunately, after I got saved, I invited Bruce to go with me to church. And you've heard me tell the story, but he had a real nice car, and I said, Bruce, come to the house and let's go for a ride. And so he and his wife were in the front seat, and me and my wife in the back seat, and we're riding down the road, and I'm trying to get my nerve up to witness to him, and I said, hey, Bruce. And he looks in the rearview mirror, and he said, yeah, I lost my nerve. I said, boy, your car rides good. He said, thank you. On down the road towards Stone Mountain we went, got my nerve worked back up. Hey, Bruce. He looks in the mirror, and yeah, I lost my nerve again. I said, boy, your car rides good. He says, what you told me? I said, look, I'm trying to get my nerve up to tell you that I've been a Christian, I've been saved, and I'm a Christian. I want you to go to church with me. And to my surprise, he said, okay. So he came and he sat near the back. Me and Linda were near the front. During the invitation, my wife got up out of the pew, went back to where Bruce was, took him by the hand, tears running down her face. She said, Bruce, would you get saved this morning? And I watched him walk the aisle. and give his heart to Christ. Well, soon after I surrendered to preach, then Bruce surrendered to preach, and we preached up and down the country, setting up tents and sharing the gospel with him. But what I'm saying is, I didn't want to become what alcohol had caused other people to become. But I made that decision before I became a Christian. I'm just saying there's some things you need to go ahead and make a decision about before it happens. And here you got these three boys. I'm sure the peer pressure would kick in. I mean, everybody is bowing. Multitudes are bowing. And here they are standing by themselves. Peer pressure has a tremendous amount of authority and weight in our lives. I was watching a guy today. He's a movie star, and he talked about how he went to, I guess, an Academy Award type thing, and he was going to give his testimony when he received the award, and he said some of the people in the audience he had prayed with before, he had shared his testimony with before, but said he watched and none of them would stand, none of them would clap because of peer pressure. So here the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are standing among these multitudes of people. And for the most part, most people I know at least, would say if everybody else is doing it, I can do it and not really mean it. I can go ahead and bow, but not really mean it. I mean, I can go ahead and pretend. But they wouldn't even do that. And they knew they were facing danger. They knew they were facing the fiery furnace. And yet, in spite of that, they said, we're not going to bow. Because they'd made this decision back here. A few of you know this story here, but alcohol will make you do things. And the reason I'm saying this here is because we're living in a day to where I see young mothers at the grocery store with little children in the buggy and a six-pack. Because it's got to the place it's accepted, even in churches today. I mean, even among some preachers. There was a time I had to deal with a situation here, and the man decided he'd go to another church, and we couldn't grant him a letter because of the situation, and so I called the preacher where he was going to, and I said, look, we can't grant the letter because of the fact that he's got involved with alcohol. And the preacher said to me, that's no problem with me. And so it is becoming an accepted thing to where you're not frowned upon or looked down upon, and more young couples are getting involved. But anyway, we had a situation here. We had Miss Martha had gotten in her little old Volkswagen Doodlebug on a Wednesday night after service. And she's gone up 85 to 138. She's headed up 138 to Terra Boulevard where she lived. And as she makes her way up Terra Boulevard, up 138, this young man who had been to Hooters had taken one drink, then another drink, then another drink, until he was drunk. And he's coming the opposite direction and crosses the line and hits Miss Martha head on. puts her in the hospital. I mean, she is banged up and cut up and bruised up and hurt. I'm telling you, she was, I wasn't for sure whether she's going to live or die. Matter of fact, she asked the paramedic as they were helping her get out of the car, am I going to die? And they said, no, we're not going to let you die. But I'm telling you, that guy had crossed that line because he's drunk and hit her. And again, he just drank one drink, but then a second, and then a third, until he's drunk. So I went to see Miss Martha in the hospital. And when she got to where she could talk, she said, Preacher, would you do me a favor? I said, well, I'll do my best. What you want me to do? She said, would you find out where that young man is and give him 2 messages for me? First of all, tell him I forgive him. And tell him I want him to know God's forgiveness. I said, I will. So I found out he was in jail. I went to the jail. They brought him to the attorney's booth. I'm sitting there across from this young man. And I said, you're looking in the face of the man who pastors the lady that you almost killed the other night. I said, you deserve to be put under the jail. You deserve to have the book thrown at you. You have impacted her life for the rest of her life, and you deserve to be punished for it. But I said, look at me. She has sent me to tell you 2 things. First of all, she forgives you. And tears began to run down her face. But I said, second of all, she wants you to know the forgiveness of Christ. I said, what you going to do about it? That young man started sobbing, and he said, I'd like to know his forgiveness. So I reached out and took him by the hand and led him out of darkness into light. He became a child of God. But when he got out on bail, he went by the hospital to see Miss Martha. And he's leaning across the rail. Miss Martha takes him by the hand, tears running down his face. And she said, I forgive you. And he said, thank you so much. When I remembered that story this morning, I was praying for him. I haven't seen him since then. Don't know what he's doing. And I'm hoping he took that and has done something with it. I'm hoping he has used that for his good and God's glory. But that boy, that young man, had made a decision to go buy Hooters, never dreaming that 1 drink was going to lead to 2, and 2 was going to lead to 3. And he was going to become drunk and hit Miss Martha head on. Sometime after that, a man come here and he was wanting to join the church, and I was going through some things we believe and stand for, and I knew he was a businessman, and I said to him, well, let me tell you this. I said, you need to be aware of the fact that we preach against alcohol here. We're teetotalers. We don't drink sociably. He said, well, now, I don't know. He said, sometimes I have to entertain clients, and I'll go for a social drink. I don't get drunk, but I go for a social drink. And I don't see any harm in that. I said, come with me. So I walked him up the hall to Miss Martha's office. I said, now I want you to look in her face and you tell her what you just told me. and let her tell you the story about what one drink will do. That leads to 2 and to 3. I said, go ahead. Well, he didn't. What I'm saying to you is there's some things that you've got to make a decision before. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not decide on the spot. They had already made a decision that they were not going to bow, no matter what everybody else did. I know when my kids were growing up, they'd say, Daddy, everybody's doing it. I said, no, they're not. You're not. This family's not. We don't do that in this house. I don't care what everybody else is doing. We're not going to do that in this place here. So what I'm saying to you is, you read the scriptures, you make some decisions based upon what the Bible says, and decide it before the fact. Don't wait until you're in the situation and feel peer pressure or feel like something's got to be done or you're going to be embarrassed. I'm just, you may think I'm extreme on this, but I don't like, when I'm riding down the road, I don't even drink from a canned drink. Because I don't want somebody to think when they pass me, I saw him drinking a beer. I was at Cracker Barrel one time with some of our folk, and I forget what the drink was. They had a drink that I loved. It was it root beer? I loved it. I tell you, I just loved their root beer. But it looked like a beer bottle. And that waitress brought that out and put it on my table, and I sat there and I'm looking at it. And back then, Cracker Barrel didn't serve alcohol. Unfortunately, they've changed, but anyway, I kept looking at that bottle, and I've got the waitress' attention. I said, ma'am, come here just a minute. She said, what is it? I said, would you bring me a glass and pour this in that glass and get rid of the bottle? I don't want anybody to think I'm drinking alcohol. My testimony means the world to me.
Amen.
And I don't want my testimony hurt. I don't want it ruined. I know I told you this, but I had pulled into Tennessee there and pulled down away from the store, and I was walking up toward the store, and this real nice looking dressed woman got out of this beautiful car. And she said, sir, just a minute. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, I notice you're from Georgia. I said, I am. She said, I just came through Georgia and I bought this lottery ticket. And I was wondering if you want it. I'm not going to turn it in. Would you like to have it? I said, well, ma'am, you're so kind. I appreciate your kindness. And I said, but just as sure as the world, that would be a winning ticket. Maybe worth $1 million or $3 million or whatever. And they'd come out and take pictures of me and put all that in the paper. And I said, people would see that and read it, and I wouldn't be able to explain to them the ticket was given to me. So they'd think that all this preaching I've done against gambling, that I didn't mean it. So I don't think I better take the ticket. She said, no, I don't think you better. I'm just saying, listen, your testimony, your influence should be considered when you do something. And I was trying to think this morning who it was. You may know who it was, but one of the presidents years ago, I think it was George Washington, had gone to a banquet and they was going to serve him wine, and he took his glass and turned it upside down to let everybody know he wasn't going to partake. And so everybody else did the same thing. Again, I'm not sure that's who it was. I believe it was, but your influence, you've got to make decisions based upon what you think is going to glorify the Lord. Now, you've heard me say this, but I don't preach in churches that use anything but the King James Bible. I just don't do it. I'm invited quite often to come to Bible studies and join with other preachers, and I mean, these are good men. I love them. They love me, but they'll invite me to come, and they say, "Preacher, we have such a good time," but I know that the different ones that are going to be there are using different versions, and I'm just not going to be a part of that. And the reason I'm not is because my influence might cause somebody else to go the wrong way. For instance, I know what I believe, and I could stand by the King James, but if I'm sitting in this group and somebody realizes I went to that group, they'd say, "Well, okay, Brother Hayes does it, so it must be okay." And so then they go and do something where they use another version. I'm just not going to do it.
Amen.
My influence means too much to me. So here are these 3 Hebrew boys. They see them building this 90-foot statue, 9 feet wide. And when the time comes for everybody to bow, they do. Except for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They say, "We're not bowing. Our God will deliver us. But if not, we're still not going to bow." So you know the story. They heated the furnace up and threw them in, and Nebuchadnezzar's watching all this stuff, and all of a sudden he said, whoa, just a minute. Didn't we put 3 men in that furnace? I see 4. Now Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't see him in the furnace. See, a lot of time when you're going through a trial, you don't know he's there with you.
Yeah.
But he is.
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's his promise. And so there he is, and he's walking with them, and they're walking around. And although they got the coats and all the other stuff on, and they're hosing. I don't know why men wear a hose, but
Keep her leg warm again.
but anyway, that wasn't those kind of hose. But not one bit of their coat or their hair or anything about them was even singed by the fire. Didn't smell like fire, didn't smell like smoke. So they ordered them to get them out, and they get them out, and Nebuchadnezzar realizes that what they went through, they couldn't go through by themselves. They had to have somebody helping them. So he recognizes that. And he promotes Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Promotes them for taking a stand. If you make a decision back here before the event takes place, it takes the struggle out of it. I don't have to struggle about certain things that I already believe, and I'm not going to let peer pressure, and just because everybody else is doing it, I'm not going to let that influence me. If God doesn't give me clear direction, I'm not going to do it. And I feel like He'll bless me because of it. I feel like He'll bless me because of it. I know I've told you this story, but I was helping build the Interstate 285 around Atlanta. And my office, I did lab tests and so forth in my office on the north side, And I'm inside my office, and about 4 of us fellows in there, and my boss's boss came in, and he's showing a magazine to these other guys. And they're oohing and ahhing and carrying on. And when he got to me, I saw what it was. I saw it was a girly magazine, so I turned my head. And anyway, so he went on outside. Well, I followed him outside. And I said, sir, if I could speak to you a minute, I sure would appreciate it. He said, sure. I said, you don't know me, but I'm Darrell Hayes, and I want to thank you for the job that you've let me have. I appreciate you letting me work in here, and I've enjoyed it. But I said, I'm going to ask you a favor. He said, what's that? He said, I'm going to ask you when you come into my office, don't bring that kind of book anymore. I said, I'm a Christian, and that's not conducive to my walk with the Lord, and I'd appreciate if you keep that stuff outside. Well, he just stared at me. Turned and walked away. Well, several days later, I came back, and he called me outside. I thought, well, here we go. I guess that's my walking paper is fixing to come up. And so he said, let me tell you something. I like the way you handled that the other day. He said, you didn't embarrass me. You didn't jump on me. You treated me like a gentleman, but you took your stand. And he said, because of that, I want to give you something. He said, here's some tickets. I want you to go by the restaurant up here in Roswell and pick up a turkey dinner for you and your family. It was almost Thanksgiving. And I said, well, you don't have to. He said, now don't tell the other guys because I'm not doing it for anybody else. But he said, I want to do it for you. And I said, okay. Well, I pulled up to the restaurant, took my tickets in. They said, you got somebody to help you? And I thought, look, I'm not a big guy, but I can handle a turkey dinner. They said, no, this is a full-blown turkey with all the trimmings. Simply because I took a stand.
Amen, brother.
What I'm saying is, listen, you've got to make some decisions beforehand. Don't wait until you're in that position, till you're in a tight. Know what you believe before you get there. Make the decision before you get there, and then you don't have to struggle with it.
That's right.
You don't have to wrestle with it and say, what am I going to do now? You just don't. So, Daniel 3, like I said, there's so many other stories, and we'll get to those later, but there's so many other wonderful stories in Daniel 3. But the one that I like is they had decided before the event what they was going to do. And it took the struggle out, and God blessed them because of it. I've asked the Lord quite often, Lord, don't let peer pressure push me to do something I shouldn't do.
Amen, brother.
Don't let me be afraid to take the stand when it's right. And I sure would appreciate it. Let's bow for prayer, if you will, please. My Father, I want to thank you, first of all, for your wonderful grace, wonderful peace, wonderful leadership in our life. And thank you for the good friends I have. Thank you for the friends here at Kenwood. Pray your riches, blessings upon them. Bless our pastor as he preaches this morning. Bless the music, the choir. Use us to glorify you for Jesus' sake. Amen.
Amen.
All right, preacher.
Amen. That's good, brother. Good, good, good. Thank you.